Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at a very nice offering from TSR from 1986, Dungeoneer's Survival Guide by Douglas Niles. Douglas Niles always wrote a good book. I like this one a lot. This really did a lot to spur my imagination. It gave me a lot of feel for the Underdark, the depth and breadth of it, the denizens. Did a lot for my campaign. So we're going to take a good look at it. This is the first book that really offered us a look into the deep world, the Underdark, deep earth, where you could go explore and find strange civilizations. I know that the Vault of the Drow and such had been printed years before, but this is the one that gave you the nuts and bolts of what it was like to actually be on your way to the Vault of the Drow, and to a good degree what it felt like to live in the Vault of the Drow. So, from 1986 by Douglas Niles, Dungeoneer's Survival Guide, today on page 121. Dungeoneer's Survival Guide, or DSG as we call it. This sees a lot of action on my table. I use this book quite a bit when I'm doing any kind of Underdark campaign or deep caves or anything like that. This is published 1986 by TSR. There's my little, that used to be my little icon in all my old books to mark them as mine. And this was from 1986 and was for the princely sum of $15, which wasn't real cheap in 1986, I have to tell you. This was completely worth it. Here we have the table of contents plus the tables themselves. And then we get Dungeoneer's Survival Guide. What is it? And the overview of the Underdark. This was the first time I ever really gave Underdark a ton of thought as far as the environment. I, of course, had run caverns in games, but they were always just naturally occurring dungeons. They weren't really anything in and of themselves. This tells us what caves are. Dead caves, wet caves, dry caves. Here we are. Stalactites, stalagmites, columns, draperies, flowstone, and gypsum flowers. All these goodies that you can throw in to enhance your dungeon. Now, if you followed my channel for a while, you know I'm a big 3D tabletop guy. I like to have terrain. Years ago, Dwarven Forge put out an excellent cavern set. I have that. I've also made my own caverns. I love caverns. I love the Underdark. My players are sick of the Underdark because of me. I've used Drow too much, I'm afraid, for their sensibilities. A couple of my players don't like the Drow. They feel they're too strong. I feel my players just need to be tougher. And I've told them that. We disagree. But anyway, here is movement, holding one's breath, diving and surfacing underwater in the Underdark, climbing for non-thieves. This was a very useful section here. Every DM who's run for any length of time knows that you hit points where non-thieves want to climb for whatever reason. There are no real rules to cover that until now. 1986, we had the rules. And then climbing modifiers, rappelling, jumping for non-acrobats, right here. The acrobat class had been introduced a year earlier in the Art Arcana. So here we have how you jump if you're not an acrobat. So it was pretty neat. It was a nice tie-in to what AD&D was at the time in 1986. This is one of the early books after Gygax had left. And really, it has no... it's got a nice flavor to it, simply because it was written by Douglas Niles, and it's really just a rules book. So there's a good flavor to this book. I like it. Belays, swinging across the chasm. Bridges, permanent bridges, impromptu bridges. And then, most importantly, falling, the expanded rules. This was the one that gave us the definitive rules for falling. Basically, you fall 10 feet, you take a die 6. You fall 20 feet, you take 2 die 6. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. And then the next 10 feet, 3 die 6, so on and so forth, until you reach 20 die 6, which is, in D&D terms, terminal velocity. I like that rule, and I use that rule. Now, I have had some players with lots and lots and lots of hit points who said 20 die 6. Okay, average on that is going to be about 65. I've got 90 hit points. Fine, I'll take that chance, and I jump. I break their leg. I do something to penalize them for being so cavalier with their characters, no pun intended. I make sure that they understand that it is a penalty to just wantonly dive off a cliff and fall 1,000 feet, that you're not necessarily going to survive it. Here we have actual spelunking, excavation, fatigue, and exhaustion. That can be a big problem. It goes into air, breathable, when you have breathable air, not breathable air, slippery surfaces. Proficiencies. This is where this book really shines. We got a bunch of new proficiencies. We got a nice comprehensive table for weapon and non-weapon proficiencies, how you gain them, and a bunch more really filled out proficiencies. Prior to this, the proficiencies were out of the DMG. There were only a couple of paragraphs on them, and everybody was just kind of hand waved. This book gave us definite proficiencies, basic ability that you would use to make the check on, and why you would take certain proficiencies. I really ran with this. I wrote up a chart where player character races and classes got certain proficiencies automatically. Maybe I'll show that sometime down the line. And so there'd be auto includes, and then you could still add proficiencies. So non-weapon proficiencies kind of became a big thing in my campaign. Her adventuring proficiencies right there. This was just a nice addition to this. Experience point for proficiencies. I don't give experience points if somebody makes a successful Boyer Fletcher skill to make a bow. Well, Boyer is the bow, Fletcher is the arrows, I know. Combat rules for underground play, fighting in walls and other sheer surfaces. Noise is a big factor in the Underdark. Making a little bit of noise goes a very long way. So for a DM, you have to be conscious of that and maybe do the old wandering monster checks. Yes, I do those. Make those a little more frequently, especially depending on where they are. Fighting in water, fighting in darkness, spellcasting in darkness, mounted combat. Yes, you can have mounts in the Underdark. All kinds of goodness in here. This book is available on DriveThruRPG. It's, I think, $10 for the PDF. It's really worth it. The battle system rules called out here are for Battle System First Edition. Not a fan of Battle System First Edition. If you saw my review of the Second Edition Battle System, that's the one we play. Cave-ins on a battlefield. There are maybe times you want to cave in part of a battlefield. Underground environment. Air supply. Not just a band from the early 80s from Australia, but an actual problem down below. Fire and smoke, poison, noxious gases, ventilation, odor detection. All is brought out in here. Cave-ins, how to deal with them, how lethal they are. For me, if it's a full cave-in, it's a TPK. I've never done one. I've done partial cave-ins, but if you're in a cavern and it drops, it's time for a new character. Effects of cave-ins. Now, sometimes you want to do a partial cave-in, push the characters in one direction or another, or more importantly, seal them off. Here are rules on how to do it. So, NPC's reaction to long underground adventures. Yeah, you start going crazy when you can't see green, you can't smell fresh air, see the sun. Unless, of course, you're one of the races that lives underground, like a dwarf, you're not used to that. Standing water, how dangerous it can be. Water temperature. This goes into hypothermia. Yes, you can get hypothermia very easily. Underground water travel. If you want to build a raft and go ahead to cross that Underdark lake, that's how you do it. And then mining. I like the mining. Mining helped me kind of reconsider the types of mines. I always tended to consider just the classic, rail car going down on tracks mine, but there are many, many different kinds of mines. Quality of mine products. Hazards of making a claim and holding a claim. We've all seen enough old westerns to know how dangerous that can be. Natural hazards, unnatural hazards. There's a lot of evil monsters that live in the Underdark, as we all know from the Drizzt Do'Urden books. New equipment. Collapsible boat, a canoe, a kayak. Oil skins to waterproof your stuff. All kinds of goodies in here. Expedition planning, beasts of burden. Do you use mules for your campaign? I really don't, but I don't object to it. How to fight effectively on a watercraft. How to keep play moving. One thing that can happen with this book if you let it as a DM, and if you do, it's on the DM, is you can bog down in the details and you can slow play way the heck down. So I recommend that you kind of monitor that. Languages in the Underdark. And now we come to the Dungeon Masters section. This is pretty cool. It gives a lot of DM ideas and tips on how to deal with it, how to just keep your campaign moving forward, the nature of the underground environment and its denizens. So the ecology, you want to look at why it is what it is. And keep in mind, this book was published when Greyhawk was the only setting. So everything in this book is actually Greyhawk. Theories on the nature of the Underdark, including Hollow Earth. Recent Godzilla Kong film talks a lot about Hollow Earth. And then Cultures of the Underdark. This is the first real thumbnail we got in one place talking about all the cultures that live down there. The Drow, the Koatua, the Duergar. Lands of Deep Earth, connecting passages in Deep Earth. And here we have some maps. So, on how to map, you're kind of doing a 3D thing. And now individual key areas, you have there's a lake that's there. Surface lands, upper caverns, cathedral caverns, Grand Canyon of Deep Earth. There's all kinds of stuff in here. A lot of adventure ideas. A sunken swamp. That's just a cool idea. I've never done it, but now that I'm actually thumbing through this again, I read through this prepping for this video, and I got a bunch of ideas. And yeah, guys, we're probably going back in the Underdark soon. Bunch of DM ideas in here. And of course, the fungi forest and all kinds of monsters that lurk within. Lava caves, lower Grand Canyon of Deep Earth, lands of the deep gnomes, realm of the drow. All this goes beautifully with all kinds of stuff that's come before and since in D&D. So here's even an interplanar whirlpool. Maybe you're way down deep in the Underdark and you come across some kind of dimensional rift. Campaign considerations. Basically, like I said, it's really easy in this type of book, in this type of environment, to get bogged down in the details and slow the story way down. You've got to be careful with that. Don't fall for that. Go ahead and write up good notes for yourself. And the better notes you have for yourself, the better the players will be able to get along, because they'll ask something, you'll answer it, and you'll be able to move forward. So if you're going to run an Underdark campaign, I've considered this book essential. And then just make some real good notes for yourself. So, running the game, preparing for play. And you don't have to be overwhelmed by this either. It's just a gaming environment, but it's a lot of fun. This can breathe so much life into a campaign and keep that life the entire time you're in the Underdark. You can do a bunch of stuff in the Underdark. Okay, and then how to map it. Here's some sample maps for you. And here are the compiled tables, which is pretty darn handy. These are various tools you would need to draw up your little maps. All the compiled tables. Some blank maps for you to draw. You can copy these and draw on them. So I consider this book an essential. This sits on the shelf with all of my other key D&D books. And this book, like when I'm running an Underdark campaign, absolutely is on the table. So there we have it, Dungeoneer Survival Guide by Douglas Niles. Douglas Niles, great job. I love this book. And as I said, it's available on DriveThruRPG for about $10. You can find a copy online for not a ton of money. I recommend it. I really like this book. I find it a very handy resource to have at my fingertips. Well, that's it for today for page 121. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And if you like what you heard, please like and subscribe. If you have any ideas for any future videos, please go ahead and leave those in the comments as well. And I'll see you next time on page 121.